Howdy everyone, it's me once again, the one and only Jordan. So today, as you can see, I'm still continuing my Disney movie marathon where I'll be talking about the movies, obviously the TV shows, programming, I don't know, whatever the case, maybe if it's related to Disney in any shape or form, I might as well talk about it. So I just figured I might as well get to the third installment of a certain film series I'll be talking about. So I might as well get to it and just wrap things up, I guess. And yes, that's one of your folks. And yes, again, I did see this one on Disney Plus, by the way. And yes, again, I do realize that this was on, I guess, based upon some book series, which, again, like I said before, I've never read. I'm just trying to look at this as a movie, of course. Anyway, I just thought I'd just review this and just wrap things up, so to speak. Anyway, of course, as always, let's talk about the plot, shall we? So, here we go. So, okay, obviously, this takes place sometime after the first movie, of course. I guess about 3 years after the events of the previous film, to be more exact. So, Lucy being one of the characters that I was staying with the cousin character, while the older sibling, Peter, and the other character, I guess siblings, I suppose, are in America as World War II rages onward. So of course that does become a thing in this movie, obviously. So yeah, of course, taking place quite some time, and obviously they do make references to the previous events of the film. And yes, of course, Lucy and the other character definitely have to, so to speak, do their thing because, concerning the fact, they have to return to Narnia with their cousin, where they meet up with the prince again, because the prince character wants to go on this ride across the sea aboard the royal ship, of course, and along the way they encounter dragons and such, of course, obviously, because there's quite a bit going on here, folks. And yes, there's a whole thing with this band of lost warriors and whatnot before reaching the edge of the world, so to speak, I guess. But anyway, this is supposed to be one of these adventure type movies where there's this character, this prince, is singing out the lords of this place. Of course, there's this evil form of green mist that's threatening Narnia, and something must be done about that quite clearly because something's amiss here. Something's definitely amiss here, quite obviously. So anyway, and there's quite a bit going on. And yes, there's gonna be a lot of fighting, this grand battle kind of a thing, quite clearly. But anyway, yeah, there's quite a bit going on when it comes to the story of this. Yes, of course, going to have to go on a Voyager kind of a thing. Yes, these characters pretty much have to return to Narnia again in order to help this prince gather all seven swords of the Lord to fight against this dark force, quite obviously. And yes, there has to be some kind of conflict, quite clearly. But anyway, this third installment, in a whole, as a whole, I definitely say is a pretty solid film. Of course, there are plenty of elements of this film I could say that are pretty good. There's the humor, there's the excitement, dangers, and of course, trying to have these characters team up. Of course, at the end of the day, the plot itself is very straightforward and easy to understand, and that's fine. It's filled with excitement, especially with the battle sequences, such as with one with the dragon. It's quite entertaining in its own little way. And I can say that plot and characters are pretty entertaining in their own right. And I can definitely say is, yes, of course, there are elements from the book that didn't make it into the movie. And I do realize that, and I can't understand that could upset some people who are fans of the book series. And yes, it's understandable as why you may get annoyed with that kind of a thing. Unfortunately, yes, not everything from the books are going to make it into the film. Yeah, I will agree that it should be as faithful as possible, but then I can make it not boring because you read the book series already. You already know what's going to happen. So it's a trick, I guess, a double-edged sword to some extent, because you can't make it too far off from the original material, because if you're going to do that, it might as well be just something entirely different. So I guess it's a bit of a balance in that. I mean, yes, ultimately you're just adapting the overall concept of a book into a film, and you don't literally need to include every single detail in the movie and whatnot. I mean, yes, of course, you should adapt it as much as you could, be faithful as possible, obviously. But you do have to make it entertaining. Those are people who never read the source material, who are not familiar with the books themselves. So how can you keep them entertained? Because people who have not read the books, of course, they're not going to know what's going on completely because they're not familiar with the source material. So how can you keep the mainstream audiences and along with the fans of the book series be entertained as well? So yes, it's definitely a balancing act, so to speak, and that can be rather troublesome, clearly, because you're trying to make it as interesting as possible. The characters should be entertaining, of course, and as they battle to overcome their own battles, I guess you can say, and those, of course, there is a subplot that's aimed for adults, and it still can be understood by children at face value. There's the whole thing with that, of course. But yes, obviously, you have to make sure that it's well written. And to some extent, it is, I guess you can say. I mean, yes, obviously, there are some bits and pieces that could have been better, but clearly, the characters themselves must take a moral stance, so to speak, and it does show here. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Quite clearly. I mean, yes, these characters have been in this storyline for quite some time, and some characters might have actually aged up a little bit, and that's fine because, like I was saying, this story takes place quite some time after the first two films, and I presume that they're trying to wrap things up in this one and whatnot, and that's fine. When I think about it, I can definitely say is not too shabby of a movie when it comes to adaptations. The visually, it's actually pretty good. Whatever it's choreographed, the way it's made, the special effects, all this are actually quite well made. Not too shabby on that front. On the visual level, it's actually really well made. You could actually see that this film does have a big budget. You can obviously see that, and I do think that's a good thing, of course. As a whole, when it comes to story, it's pretty solid. It's pretty much like your standard affair when it comes to the fantasy movies, of course. So there's that. I can definitely say that this film does, of course, really focus on effects and whatnot, and I guess that could be fine in some ways. I will admit that there are better fantasy movies out there, but ultimately this isn't too shabby. Anyway, I'll give this film an overall rating of a 6.8 out of 10. It gets a 6.8 out of 10 for me. So, of course, as always, thanks for watching and take care. Until next time, see ya. Oh, yeah. Later.